And this is from John Davis talking about the Chargers draft. And he said, we already had enough receivers with Palmer, and we resigned Jalen Guyton. How is Herbert or re-signed Jalen Guyton? How is Herbert going to throw to all these guys?
Well, it's a good question, but I think the history of the NFL, John Davis, is that you need depth, you need injuries, receivers, because you're going to have injuries.
Right.
The other factor in the equation, and John and I had talked about in this past, because of the salary cap issues the Chargers have, they push money to the back of contracts. Next year, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams' contract will each have a cap figure of $30 million. $30 million. You can't afford to have two receivers earning that kind of money. Somebody's going to leave here at the end of this coming season, whether it'll be Keenan Allen, will be bought out or released, or Mike Williams. So it'll make way for this new young stud wide receiver that they really like, Quentin Johnston. The other guys have had injury problems. Now, I think Palmer took a huge jump, but you just can't have three guys on your roster. We don't know if Guyton will regain all the speed he had coming off knee surgery. You'd probably need to be 6 deep at wide receiver. I wish they would have taken a defensive tackle, but after the big tackle from Georgia went off the board to the Eagles, there was really no other stud tackle that you would take at number 21. And historically, the Chargers have never been a team that's traded back that said, well, we could take the second-ranked defensive tackle and maybe we'll take him at 28 or something. Never really historically have traded back. Tom Telesco has always been conservative. I like the pick. I think they had a good draft. They still have some holes. There's still free agents out there that they could sign to probably lower price contracts. So when we did our draft recap a week ago, on our podcast, I gave them a letter grade of A. I thought they were one of the 6 or 7 teams that had A's, just because I think Johnston serves a really different role in the offense. He's a future guy against one of the guys who's going to leave. We still don't know whether or not the Austin Eckler thing is ever going to get solved, or whether he's going to leave as a free agent, or whether they get a trade offer as they get closer to the start of the season because somebody got hurt and somebody else needs a running back. So still a lot of moving parts with the Chargers. End of the day, I like the draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good pick, I think, and I hear you on the figures, the financial figures for those wide receivers, but I'm still freaking out about Lionel Messi and $286 million for 1 year. I mean, that's more than the salary cap for an entire NFL team. And I digress, but the Chargers still blew that game against Jacksonville.
Oh.
And the bottom fell out. They couldn't stop the run. So you got all these receivers, but what are they going to end up winning games like, 49-42? Is this going to be a shootout every week?
Well, Justin Herbert's got the ability to probably do that. And maybe they wind up having to do that. I mean, keep in mind, what's your mailing address? AFC West. Who's in the AFC West? That guy, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, yeah.
So you just may have to average 50 points a game. It won't be 50, but there will be shootouts. I thought it was a good trick. Okay, next comment.
All right, next comment. This is from MH on the YouTube channel. Hey, big win for Japanese baseball. Trevor Bauer got barreled by the Yomiuri Giants.
Well, so they lost a game. He lost a game. He's pitching once a week there. He had dominated his first 2 starts. He had 3 minor league starts in which he was really dominant. He's going to get banged around, and now we'll see how he responds after getting banged around. One of the intangibles about pitching in Japan is just the work schedule is really different. You work really hard between starts, but you only start 1 time per week in Japan. The ball is different. The height of the mound is different. There are all types of adjustments, and I'm not talking about eating Japanese food and sushi. I'm talking about the actual logistics of baseball. I still think if he's totally healthy, statistically, Trevor Bauer is going to dominate these guys more often than not. So he got banged in one. We'll see how he responds to getting banged.
Well, this just goes to show you the quality of the play in the Japanese league. So, I mean, Trevor Bauer is legit as a pitcher. And if the Giants can knock him around, in the big dome there in Tokyo, then, that's a special league. And maybe we're going to see more of that talent come to America.
How good is the Japanese league? Just witness what we saw. We came through with Team Japan World Baseball Classic. There's a lot of good ball players over there.
Yeah.
And more are coming stateside almost on an annual basis now as free agents.
So you got international players in the NBA. We're going to see a lot of this in baseball. And this is what makes sports so fantastic.
On we go. Another fans forum question.
Okay. This is from PR Superfly on the Twitter channel. And he says, Hey, probably need a straight shooter like you, Hacksaw, even though this is a more comfortable lifestyle now. Tell us the truth. Do radio personalities or stations get memos from the proteins to not talk bad about the ball club? Sure seems like it is in the San Diego market.
Well, that's a legitimate question. I never read memos. I didn't go to staff meetings. No, don't bother me with that junk. I have a talk show to do. Now, I never once in my entire career as a voice of the Chargers ever was told what to say or what not to say. I got reaction from sometimes things I said, but nobody was going to tell me how to do my talk show. I do get the sense that within the last 5 years, that maybe the whole atmosphere of the rights holder, the flagship station, has been forced to change. My whole philosophy as a talk show host, John, as long as I'm fair to you while telling everybody on that 50,000 watt blowtorch signal I was on that was a bad trade, as long as I'm fair to you, that's part of the game.
Right.
But people do respond. People do get upset. I never, in the 13 years as voice of the Chargers, I never once had a problem with the Chargers. Not with ownership, not with coaches, rarely ever with players. I don't think I was a homer, but I always gave them the benefit of the doubt because I knew what was going on inside and who was hurt and who couldn't play well and who was overmatched and who had to maybe be out of position. But never once was I told. Now, I had problems after they left our station, and I got treated, and our broadcast team got treated really badly by the Spanos family. And then they started to push back, and to which I said, I don't work for you. You never paid me a dime. I'm going to say what I'm going to say on this talk show.
Yeah.
And then there was hell to pay. Then there were a lot of problems. But that being said, I think there are probably pressure points. The Padre radio station right now talks about our Padres. That's shaded towards homerism to me. Now, you don't have to be negative. You don't have to bury Juan Soto, but you can critique Juan Soto because I think that comes part and parcel with the job. And the same thing with AJ Preller, or the same thing with past ownership. Now, maybe there's a lot of pressure points now that weren't there 5 years ago and when I was doing talk show radio. The worst ownership in Padre baseball was Tom Werner and the group of 15, whose first words after they took over the franchise were fire sale. Well, they deserve to be roasted and criticized and ripped. But see, when you got competing radio stations and one of them's a rights holder, they may handle the hometown team a little bit differently than the other one that no holds barred. And that just comes with the equation. And I always took the philosophy in dealing with the Chargers, we're paying you a lot of money to put these games on the air. We do a really good job in our game day broadcasts and all of our NFL coverage. We're paying for the right to say what we believe. And with rare occasion were there problems at 690 with Chargers. Now, it came from other talk show hosts who were making rather bold statements. Everybody does their own talk show differently. So that's a really valid question. That sure sounds like a really good topic in a letter to the editor of the Union Tribune about what is the responsibility. I took the philosophy, I'm not bashing the team that's on my station just for the sake of bashing them as a talk show host, because my sales guys have to go out and they have to sell all the advertising packages so we can pay the rights fee. So to sit there and just screech about how horrid they are, and they had a bunch of 4-12 seasons and 6-10 seasons when I was voice of the Chargers, and then they got good and we were all excited. And I saw you drinking beer the night they came home from the AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh.
What a night!
What a night for sure in the rain. So, but that's a tremendous question. I think the pressure points are really different now than they were before. I don't think we should beat up the hometown team, but we shouldn't ignore the stories that have to have comment. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think as a journalist, you have to be objective. You have to be fair. And when something negative needs to be said, it needs to be said. And so I think that's great. Now, let's talk a little bit about Don and Mud, who I love. They do a great job with the broadcast team for the Padres. But you can tell that they're careful about what they say. And they're obviously being paid by the Padres, right? They're on the Padres payroll. So they're not, if they have something negative to say, they kind of sandwich it between two positives. They're not as critical, because I think a lot of it is that they see these players every day. They're on the airplane with them when they travel, and they don't want to say something negative and then have the player angry at them, the next night.
Well, the big issue, I'll give you a prime example. When I was the voice of the Chargers, Rodney Harrison was coming up and was making himself a Pro Bowl safety. Really good football player, tough guy. But he was over the line a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And he launched and nailed a Bengals receiver in the face mask, gave the guy a concussion. It was a brutal hit, and he got a 15-yard penalty, and he was going to get fined for the hit. And Bobby Ross criticized him that Monday in the weekly press conference. And I made a comment about Rodney, and he got really upset at me. I made a comment, please somebody tell Rodney Harrison who Darryl Stingley is. Darryl Stingley broke his neck. Mm-hmm. He got hit on a really bad Jack Tatum violent hit. And then Rodney stopped me on the tarmac on a road trip and said, why did you say that? I said, because it was a dangerous move by you. And your coach criticized you. The league fined you. And do you know who Darryl Stingley is? I don't want to see that happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we stayed friends. I just explained it. The one thing as a talk show host is if you're going to say something in critical fashion, you better have the brass to make sure you go in that clubhouse or in that locker room to answer questions if that player wants to come to you and say, why would you say that about me?
Mm-hmm.
I was longtime friends, Chase Headley, Padres third baseman. He had the 30 home run season, a mystical career year, phenomenal. Really nice person. One of our talk show hosts made the comment, where did all this come from? Maybe they should drug test Chase Headley. He was so upset. And he came to me,
mm-hmm.
and he was beating me up. And I said, time out. You deal with this talk show host. I thought it was a terrible cheap shot, but it was the way talk show radio was becoming. Everybody would say anything that came off the top of their empty skull, but would not have the brass to go in the clubhouse and know they'd cross paths with Rodney Harrison or Chase Headley, et cetera. So there comes a responsibility being a host about being dynamic and funny and laughing and firing shots. Some responsibility you carry with you in your wallet. If you're going to do that, you have to be a man to stand up to answer the question when you get confronted. Because if you said that about me, John, I'm going to confront you off the air, and you're going to have to explain why you would say something stupid like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my philosophy.
Well, as a journalist, you're asking tough questions of them. Mm-hmm. So they deserve every right to ask tough questions of you. And, if you have integrity in what you do in your career, then you're going to respond and you're going to give them an objective, reasonable answer to why you made the comments you did. Rodney Harrison, yeah, he played pretty aggressive. He's another Draymond Green type.
He was on the edge.
Yeah, but he's had a really nice career with NBC now.
Yes, very much so. That's a real valid question. Thanks for joining us. Got one more you want to throw up here before we wrap up Fans Forum?
We want to talk Raiders here? We got another Raider comment here.
Do we have to? Go ahead.
From John Hopkins, and he says, hey, to be honest, it was going on before Gruden returned there. Can I say Jamarcus Russell? And they'd not have had that much to cheer about except for Gruden since the 1990s. Of course, I thought Gruden ran Tony Dungy's Buccaneers team into the ground after inheriting it. They fell apart quickly after that Super Bowl win. The Raiders have a lot of legacy and heritage, but sometimes I think history stifles them.
Well, history and heritage is still in the back closet with a dented trophy with dust on it. More recently, no. I made a comment on a talk show in Las Vegas, and I got really upset at me. They had me on talking about the move of the Raiders, and it was exciting. And the new stadium and the city is exploding with enthusiasm. And, it's obviously become a mecca of pro sports and building stadiums and arenas and franchises going in. I made the comment, do you people in Las Vegas know what you're getting? And the host said, what are you talking about? I said, do you know that team has a composite record of 90 wins and 182 losses in the last decade in Oakland? That's what you're getting. And I said, I'm sorry, with apologies in advance. You may call them the silver and black, but until they start winning, I'll continue to call them the silver and bleak.
Well, I mean, they did sign up for getting Raider Nation and all the, their fan base, which is an eclectic bunch, to put it politely. But Vegas has to be excited to have an NFL team, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that Raider brand.
Yeah. Raider Nation out of jail on